Hello, I'm your host, Leonard Duncan. Welcome to a new episode of ATV-TALK and Motorsports Podcast. Please join us every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We bring you interviews with industry professionals, live events, live news about the motorsports industry in every episode. Enjoy the show. Whether we are out riding with our friends and family or racing in extreme environments, we all need good tires. That's why I recommend GBC Power Sports Tires, a division of Greenball Corp. Their products, which include XC Master, Mini Master, and Groundbuster 3, are what leading professionals in the ATV-UTV industry are using. You can get your tires at greenballtires.com or find them on Instagram as GBC Tires for further inquiries. Brian Fry, welcome to ATV Talk. How are you, sir?
Hey, Leonard, how you doing? Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure, brother. You're one of the early legends from Southern California that everybody that lived in our area or even around the world knew of you.
Yeah, I got in it at the beginning, I guess. So that's then we had a lot of TV time too back then, so that helped a lot as far as people knowing out of state, other countries.
Well, the Mickeys, one of the coolest things about the Mickeys is I got to do a little bit of traveling when Mickeys was still around, and it would pop up on the television, and you're in a foreign country.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you get to see Mickeys. So ATV racing or the stadium racing was awesome, and it helped ATVs grow throughout the world just because of those shows. If we could ever do a Mickey's Race series again, or if they ever had something like that again, it'd be really great.
Yeah, I was more. I learned later in life, people were like, "Yeah, I used to always watch you racing speedway." That's what everybody always said. I seen you on TV racing speedway because we did that for 4 years with Suzuki deal when they were paying for the televised.
Right.
That lasted 85 through 86, 87, 88. So that was all Suzuki money, and Suzuki paid for televised. And that's where I had a lot of people, in future after racing. So yeah, I used to watch you on TV racing speedway all the time. So that's where most of the people recognize me, from the television speedway event.
Being that you have a motorcycle and background, did you speedway a motorcycle as well as an ATV?
Never tried one. I wanted to at one point, but I never did.
I just don't. I flat tracked motorcycles, but I just don't see how you can. I mean, it just takes big balls to do that, doesn't it?
It's very difficult from what everybody I've talked to, the speedway guys, because everything's backwards. It's like you gas it to get the wheels spinning to get you sliding. And if you leave it spinning down the straightaway, you don't go anywhere. You got to let off the gas to go faster. You let off, and then it starts hooking up. And if you let off too much, then you're flipping over backwards on a wheelie. You got no brakes or anything to stop that from happening. It's all throttle control. I remember McGrath tried it, and I can't remember the girl's name. She was really fast at Race Speedway. She was a little cute blonde girl, probably about 18. And there was a video of McGrath going out to Maley's Ranch, and he's like, "I'm going to try my first speedway bike, and I'm going to get my butt kicked by a girl here." And the girl was showing him how to ride it, and he just looked like an amateur out there. I mean, being Jeremy McGrath, the Supercross star, and you know who he was. He was like, "Man, this is totally different than riding a motocross bike."
So, how different was it for you on the quad, on the speedway? I mean, you guys had those things hooked up, and were you able to drive around the whole oval just wide open?
Well, the first year was just figuring out how to do it, it's because I never did any oval track racing on a three-wheeler or a quad. So it was all experimentation in 85, and we were tying our rear suspension down with a tie down. And, of course, that didn't work very well, but that's all we knew back then. And then 86, just put lower mounts on my lower A-arms to move the shocks out and lower the front that way. And it made it real rigid, so you didn't have to have a sway bar, which, sway bars weren't even, I mean, I think they were a thing in 86 on a quad at that point, maybe, but I don't remember if they were. And then had the lowering struts for the rear that came into play. I think I did something different on my shock, though, because the lowering struts made them real soft in the rear. I did something else. I can't remember what I did to make it lowered in the rear. And then 87s where it really played in, where I decided to really figure out how to make a quad go around in circles. And I used the sprint car ideas of built my 500 quad into all staggered offset and staggered tires and different size rims on the rear, with the same Hoosier. You put a narrow tire or narrow rim on the left side, put a 10-inch wide on the right, even though you're using a wide tri-track. But I think it was a 7-inch wide on the left I ran and a 10-inch on the right. It's all weird stuff, but it made it's the opposite. It was the 7-inch was on the outside and the 10-inch was on the inside. So it made the inside tire not as tall as the outside with the 7-inch rim on that same tire. And then I had the Hoosier front tires. I bought the staggered offset, big right and on smaller left front. And that's when that really started going fast on a speedway track, was when I got all the stagger in with the sway bar and all that and lowered down. That was the year that I think I won every heat race and every main event until the championship night. It seemed like every year I'd be winning the points, and then the championship night somebody wanted it worse than me and take me out, put me in the wall or put me upside down or something in the first turn. I had some bad luck in the championship nights. My buddy Andrew Buck gave me one punt through the wall one time. But we still had fun afterwards. Still hung out, even though he took me out.
That's the story of a lot of people's, gigs. They do great until the moment. So you could lead the points in the series and not win the final day and lose the title?
Yeah, the final night was the champion. So it didn't matter if you had more points than everybody. They kept points to decide whether you get a race the next weekend or not. But I think it was top 4 come back, or top 4 or top 8. I can't remember. I think there were 16 riders that would race or something like that. And they'd take half of from the week before and be in. And you didn't get say it was 16 riders and had 8. If you got 8 in, then in your 9th, you'd have to get on the list to get back in. But I think only one time I didn't make it in automatic the next time because my engine blew up or something like that. I DNF'd from a motor blow up.
But all the other times you were the guy.
I was one of the guys. I'd say, yeah, there were some guys that were pretty fast. Everybody got really fast, like in 88. And then after that, then some other guy, then when it wasn't Suzuki, it was you could ride a Honda or whatever you wanted because Suzuki backed out after 88. And then some really guys got really fast, like Steve Owens. He was real fast. He had an alcohol burning 250R motor. That bike was really fast. He put a lot more effort into it than I did as far as making his bike faster, because I was kind of doing it for fun after 88. I think I stayed in the speedway till 90, I believe, but I just did that for fun.
How much of your racing career was devoted to the dollars versus just going out and racing?
I would say once the dollars ran out, the sponsorship money wasn't there. I kind of lost interest in it. That's why I still did speedway after 88, but I didn't do the motocross portion because I wasn't making any money, even though, I could win races, but there's just no money in the sport after Suzuki pulled out. They had all that contingency for those years, and I could make a living at it, not have to work. And 88, I was working again and spending part of my paycheck to go race, and it didn't get worthwhile.
Right. It didn't make sense, right?
No, at that point, it's kind of like having a job and boss say you can work, but you ain't getting paid. So,
Yeah, what's that all about, right?
yeah, that's why I kept the speedway around, because I always enjoyed the speedway, and its Ascot was 30 minutes from my house, and go down there and make $300 in the 80s in an evening racing. So it was still paying well, and it was cheap, cheap entry to get in, and cheap to drive down there because it's so close. But yeah, I continued the speedway stuff for quite a while, and actually, me and my wife, before we're married, we promoted some speedway racing at Ascot with a go-kart organization, and I organized the quads. That was like 89, I think. I started that when I was in a cast from a broken leg on a dirt bike. Yeah, so I didn't get a race my first season that we promoted. That was 89, so in 90 is when I got it. I was doing the promoting and the racing, so I was making money promoting it, and I was making money in the purse money. Basically, I was paying myself.
Well, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, if I won, I had to win, but yeah, I was still winning a lot on speedway, so it was pretty lucrative.
Well, that's what it's all about. You also have a history in motorcycles that most people don't know about.
Yeah. Well, motorcycles started in '72 when I was 9 on a TS 125 1972 Suzuki. It was the one year before the '73 RM 125s came out, which I was totally bummed after the RMs came out. I was like, I got the TS, which had all the lights and everything on it, because they didn't make dirt bikes in '72. You had to make your own dirt bike.
Right.
And, just like 6 months later, here comes the TM 125. It was a TM, not the RM. It was a TM 125, came out in '73. And I was down at the Suzuki shop drilling at that thing every day. But then they came out with the Git kit, which made your TS like a RM. I mean, a TM. Excuse me, I keep saying RM. I'm used to that. But the Git kit, you had a cylinder head, carburetor, expansion chamber, airbox. And if I remember right, it was like $180 for all that. And my dad my dad bought that for my Christmas present. So put all that on the TS, and it was all TM parts that you could bolt on your TS and kind of make it halfway a TM. But that's where it started there. And then I was a big kid when I was young. I was 12. I got a 1975 brand new MX 250B monoshock the first year they came out. So that was 8th grade. I was already riding a 250 in 8th grade. And that's when I rode that till I think I was 14, then ended up started racing and then got hurt right away. Actually, I got hurt in the field the first time. My throttle stuck wide open. Brother helped me work on my bike and clean the carburetor, and the old round slide carburetors back then. Underneath the cap, there's a rubber gasket, and he forgot to put that back in. So when I was riding in the field by our house where we had a motocross track we used to ride at with all the kids from the neighborhood, the long straightaway, you're wide open in 5th gear, and then there's a big sand berm at the end turn, and I was going wide open. I was racing another friend of mine. He was like 19 years old. He had the same kind of bike. He lived in the neighborhood. And we were drag racing down that straightaway on the track, and coming into the turn, I left it on a little longer to beat him into the turn. And when I let off, the bike was still wide open. And what happened is the cap came off and the slide came up above the pins in the carburetor. And the slide twisted, so it was stuck wide open. And I was just like trying to get stopped because there was a bunch of trees and all kinds of obstacles I was going to hit. And I was, like 60 mile an hour or something like that in 5th gear. And I was getting closer and closer, and I couldn't stop it. I didn't think quick enough to pull the clutch in. And I just grabbed brake, trying to get it to stop in the front end wash. And I broke my humerus here. And my arm was around backwards behind my back. But I was came up on I was 14 and that happened. And so I went through the healing on that, and I just raced a couple times before that at Irwindale. And I think took me about 2 or 3 months, and I was back. I wasn't supposed to ride for like 6 months, but I couldn't. My mom and stepdad couldn't keep me down, so I was back riding like 3 weeks after I was out of a cast. And it was the last night at Irwindale when I was 14. It would have been 77, and I had a bad crash there, and I broke my tib fib, and I was knocked out cold the track. And when I came to, all I had was ringing in my head and in my blur vision. I tried to stand up, and I didn't know I had a broken leg. I didn't even know where I was at probably at that point. I was coming out of being knocked out. And when I stood up, my bones basically were broken half. So when I stood up, they went like this in my right leg.
Oh,
and then it went like this. So it tore a bunch of nerve damage. It totally destroyed. My leg was huge, swollen. When I was in the hospital, I was in intensive care, and they had me sedated for like 4 days. All I remember is them waking me up and sticking me with a pin in my feet, asking me, "Can you feel this? Can you feel this?" And I woke up that happened on a Friday night. I woke up on a Tuesday or a Monday. And after everything was said and done, my parents told me that they were telling my parents that they might have to amputate my leg because of the circulation wasn't going. My foot was just enormous. It was full of blood and everything. So that was a bad one. And then I had it took me 3 years to recuperate from that, and I had 2 surgeries. It didn't heal. Had to do a bone graft, take bone out of my hip, put it in my leg, and it had a growth to the bone, but it didn't harden. So I had to go in there and remove all the growth, and then they packed new bone chips out of my hip. And this was like 7 months after the break. And that's when they did the bone graft surgery, and then I spent another 6 months in the cast. And then back then they put your full length cast up to your crotch. And my toes started curling under after I had my surgery in that next 6 months of healing. And I was asked, we were talking to my doctor every time, saying, why are my toes curling? He said, well, that's because you've been in the cast so long, they'll straighten out when you get out and start walking. Well, he didn't know what he was talking about. They ended up what they call hammer toes. So my toes basically were upside down. They were curled all the way under I was walking on my toenails. It was what happened. I had nerve damage from when the bones did that. It did a bunch of nerve damage, and everything atrophied. So it just my nerves started pulling my toes in underneath. And then I had to have corrective surgery, which was like 2.5 years after the accident. And they broke all my toes out. They cut the flexor tendons from the end of my toes. They reattached back beyond where they fused my toes. They put pins out of all my toes. So I had pins hanging out of my toes for 3 months. And then what they did is fuse my toes. So my toes don't move.
Wow.
Since that time, I've basically, and my foot atrophied up. Like my right foot's a 10, a little over a 10, and my left is a 13. I got like a club foot. But
wow.
That basically, I had that from 14 to 17. So my whole racing career, I raced with that damage. So that eliminated me from any kind of running or jogging. I had to do life cycles or bicycles for my cardio. I couldn't run or jog from that point on.
Did that ever deter you from riding?
No, it made me want it more. No, I had a love for motocross. I loved it, and I wanted to be a pro. That was my dream.
And you
go ahead.
You made it, didn't you?
Yeah. Actually, I made it all the way to pro on dirt bikes. I built a TT 500. I used to go to Carlsbad and watch the 4-stroke nationals every year. and I was a huge fan of the thumper bikes. I bought a TT 500 to go to Glamis with a paddle tire because we always did the dunes since the early 70s. And then I started getting I was checking out Ricky Johnson's ProTech. He had a TT 500 600 engine in the ProTech with 12, 13 inches of travel, aluminum swing arm, motocross forks, rear shock. So I ended up building my TT 500. I put Simon Sporks on it, Fox Air Shocks, Calfab aluminum 2-inch longer or 2.5-inch longer arm, and then built a TT ProTech 100 TT motor. One of the kids I went to school with, his brother, I think his name was Marcos Martino, and he was the mechanic for the head mechanic at ProTech, and I ended up going to school with his younger brother. So he introduced, after we started talking about the 4-stroke national, he's like, "Oh, my brother built Ricky Johnson's bike. He's his mechanic." And they lived right here in Whittier. So I hooked up with his older brother. He was in his 20s. And he ended up helping me build the motor and showing me how to build it. So I built this rad thumper and was racing saddleback on it all the time. But it was short-lived because the thing was blowing out third gear. And every time I blow out third gear, it was like $200-300 back then to fix it. And I was like 17 years old, and I'd quit school in my junior year and went and got a job working for a company called Rebel Smith. He was a distributor that sold to dealers in SoCal. So I was working full time as a delivery guy. I'd pull the orders and deliver to like 25 to 30 dealers a day, 3 days a week. So I was doing that and then racing the motocross, and I moved out of my parents' house when I was 17. I took the GED that summer to get my high school diploma, and I went racing full time at 17. And then the bike was breaking all the time, so I parked it and ordered a 81 Suzuki 250 floater that were coming out the new year. The following year, that was 81. So that was 1980 on the thumper. 81, I got on the Suzuki, and I started an intermediate class, and I was winning all the time, doing real well, running up front. And I ended up moving myself up to the pro class by 81. I think it was September of 81. So I raced about 8 months in the intermediate, and I moved up to the pro class. And then in 82, I bought a 480 Honda, was riding the 500 pro class on that, and riding my 250 and the 250 pro. Mainly a lot of saddleback racing, and went to different places, Indian Dunes and stuff, but saddleback was one of my favorite. Carlsbad too. And it was like probably June of 82. That was when Team Tam was his first year doing the race team.
Right.
And he came up to me and started talking to me at the races at Orange County Raceway one evening. And he said he was going to hook me up and give me a ride. So I ended up going on Team Tam in June of 82, I believe it was. I was raced with him, and he said he was going to put me in the Nationals and Supercross in 83. And I thought I had a ride with him. The last race I rode for him was San Diego Supercross. Remember they used to do them on Sunday, the CRC day?
Yep.
They'd have amateur through pro. So I won the 500 pro class for Team Tam and that day, and my two teammates in the 250 class were Mike Shoemaker and Dean Cates, and Shoemaker won the 250 class, and Cates got second in the 250 class. So we did as good as we could do, right?
Right.
They got a ride. Honda's giving bikes to Tam the next year and all the parts through Dave Arnold at American Honda, and he called me in late December and said, "Well, we got a new team and you're not part of it." What?
Yeah.
That put a damper and everything, because I was used to not working and racing full time, and then I got left with no bikes or anything. So I was like, "Oh, I got to get a job now to finance a bike." And I started looking at it, and Actually, I was talking to Dave Arnold and told him what happened. And he's like, really? He did, because he thought I was going to be on the team too. When he made the budget for all the bikes, I was supposed to get like 3 bikes or 4 bikes that year. And then a bunch of parts, that was just kind of what each rider was going to get, right? Through the team. It was Bob's bikes, but
right.
Be Bob Cam's bikes, but that's the kind of deal I was going to get the next year, I thought. And the rug got pulled out from underneath me. So his budget was spent at Honda. So Dave Arnold at Honda, he said, well, I got a guy back east that I want to sponsor too, and I'm trying to get an extended budget from Honda Japan. I'll put in for you too. I'll ask them to extend the budget for 2 riders. And for, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months, he kept telling me, you can call me every day if you want. You're not bugging me. Just, anytime you want to know what's going on, give me a call. Every time I call him, he'd say, it's looking good. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to do it. It's looking good. I was just like, yeah, cool, And then I got the call that, hey, they turned it down. If you want to do it next year, I'll be here for you. And I was just like, man, it was already 2-3 months into the season, and I didn't have anything. I didn't have it. I was working for Bob Tam part-time a little bit just for cash, get a little extra cash as well, because he had a warehouse business. I'd work there a couple hours in the morning, and I'd go practice in the afternoon. And he let me go out of my job too, 2 weeks after he took me off the team. He didn't want me around anymore, I guess. So I was like, just kind of distraught and depressed over the whole thing. I said, well, if I can't do it 100% like I've been doing, I don't even want to do it. I decided to hang it up, and I was going to not race anymore. And then the ATV racing came a few years later.
So how did you get on a 3-wheeler?
That's a funny story. So I bought a 3-wheeler and a new Honda water-cooled one. I bought an 82 air-cooled one too, Honda. And
right.
I was using that for Glamis and stuff. Like I said, my parents, they had a sandrail and stuff the whole time. We had a big group of people that always go to Glamis. So I got the 82 and was, using that for Glamis to keep me entertained. And then when the water-cooled ones came out, the 85 came out in September of 84. And I got one of the early ones, right? One of the first ones.
Right.
That was just for the dunes, just to, screw around in the dunes. I still didn't have a dirt bike then. I wasn't riding at all on dirt bikes. So we're just doing the dune thing. And bunch of my friends were racing Corona Raceway on trikes all the time. And I didn't have anything to do one evening. So I said, I'll go out and watch these guys race, So their bikes are all set up for racing, how they used to do the 3-wheelers, that wide axle, race motors, everything. Yeah, their bikes all set up, everything you could do for a race 3-wheeler. So I went out there and watched them race, and then after the races were over, I was out there partying, drinking some beer, and I said, "You guys suck." I go, I could smoke you. I could smoke you on my stock 3-wheeler. The only thing I had on that thing was the twist throttle. It still had the lights, everything on it, stock tires, everything, stock axle, nothing done to it. Off the showroom floor, twist throttle. So they're like, "Well, come out and race." I go, "I don't want to race a tricycle." I was giving them all kinds of crap, and so it turned into a $50. Well, we'll bet you, I'll bet you can't beat us, because I was just running my mouth and screwing with them, bench racing in the pits.
Right.
And, I bet my 3 different friends $50 each one of them. I said, I'll come out and race, and if I beat all you guys each give me $50, and if not, I'll pay each one of you $50. And so I came out the next week and smoked them all freaking. I got a road novice class, right? Because I didn't know where I was at or anything. And I wanted to race those guys, and that's what they were racing, right?
Right.
I wasn't planning on racing 3-wheelers. It was just a dumb bet, right? So I went out there, and I ended up lapping second place in both motos on the 3-wheeler on the stock bike. I was messing with them on the starting line. I said, "Hey, I'd flip my headlight on. I said, hey, if you see a light coming behind you bouncing, that's me lapping you. Get out of the way." And sure as shit, I lapped them all. Ended up lapping second. I got in second place both motos, even though I won the moto. So, and I was like, wow, that was kind of fun, actually. So I said, well, I'm going to go race three-wheelers and let's set the bike up. So we set the bike all up to go do the Golden State. And I said, I'm going to ride pro class, not novice class. You know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go race so I can make money out of it. So anyway, then Alan Knowles at CT was just starting his motor building skills, and we were friends since I was like 17. I knew him through Rebel Smith and from the shop, actually. He's on there all the time. And so anyway, he offered to build my motor, and Barry Kelpers, me and him grew up together. So he bought a three-wheeler too, and we we're both going to do the same thing. And Alan said he'd build both our motors and do, we just buy the parts and he'll do all the labor for free. But he didn't have his jetting down or something, because every race burned a hole in the piston. In my bike and Barry's bike, we had identical motors from Alan. So I'm not bad mouthing Alan. It's just the fact of how it went down, right? Sorry, Alan, if you're watching. But yeah, anyway, so, Golden State takes you, Hollister, Huron, or Madera. We're going up, doing some traveling, and coming back a long drive with the holes in the piston every time was getting old, And the last race I went up to was Hollister, and that's when the quads came out. They're just that month. And one of the guys I knew that was racing three-wheelers, he bought a quad. So he was up there with racing it the first time for him. And I said, let me try that thing after the races are over. So I went over and rode it and hit some jumps on that thing. And one time I kicked, and I was like kind of into one. And I landed like on the left or right front tire, was only one tire hitting. It was like out of control, right? If I was coming down to that trajectory on a three-wheeler, I'm going to kill myself, right? And I landed on this quad, and the thing just sat down. I was like, oh, that was pretty amazing. So I went back and I hit that jump again as hard as I could. And I was like, oh, man, you can get away with a lot on these quads compared to a three-wheeler. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. I was in the Suzuki shop picking up a brand new quad.
Wow.
So that's kind of how it was like a whirlwind how I ended up racing quads. It wasn't planned. It wasn't expected. It just happened.
How long did you keep racing did you stop racing the quads and motocross in '88 when the Suzuki money went away from the Golden State stuff?
I raced in '88. I raced. I know I did the Rose Bowl Mickeys. And my last race was at that point I had a job then. I was working construction, doing concrete work, and I was spending money on racing, and I was just like, man, this just ain't working. I used to make a living doing this, and now I'm making a living doing something else and paying for, my quad racing and not coming out ahead. So that's, I was kind of getting really burned out on it at that point, even though even if I won, I still wasn't making enough money to cover the costs. So I think my last race was at Glen Helen. I don't remember if it was a big event or anything. I think it was probably. But I went out there and rode practice, and I came in and I told my wife was my girlfriend at that point. We didn't get married till 92. I was 88. So I told her, I said, what I said, I just didn't have the desire to be here anymore. And I never had that feeling before where I just didn't want to be there. And first moto, I got a flat tire, and I came in. I DNF because of the flat. I got a rear flat, like on the first lap or something. And I came in. I said, "That's my sign." I go, "I'm loading up. I'm done." He's like, "What? You done? We're going to go home?" I said, "No, I'm done. I'm done racing. I'm not going to race quads anymore on motocross." So that was when I stepped aside from it and just said I'm going to keep doing the speedway stuff.
Wow. That kind of the flat tire, not wanting to be there or not feeling it, and then getting a flat tire. That's
That was my sign. It's like,
yep.
you didn't get tumbled and get hurt. You're not going to the hospital, and you don't want to do it anymore. It's time to hang it up.
Right.
And I actually ended up selling my 88 quad because I just bought an 88 quad to race that season, and that's how it went. I was just like, I'm done. Ended up selling that to the guy I worked for in construction.
Nice.
He was a good friend of mine. He ended up buying my quad from me.
Was it a Honda or a Suzuki?
The Honda. It was an 88 Honda. I had an 87 Honda because I went and bought that after I didn't get a ride with Suzuki in the factory team in 87, after riding for him in 86 and the support Suzuki team that me and Denton were on.
Right.
Yeah. They didn't give me the ride, and they gave it to Putman and Watts. Watts deserved it. Putman, not so much, and he's never beat me in any races that I can remember of. I was kind of pissed off that I didn't get the ride with Suzuki. So I said, well, I'm going to race against Suzuki. I'm going to race against him on a Honda. That's when I went and bought an 87. But you know what? I never really gelled on the Honda like I did the Suzuki.
Really?
I don't know what it was about the Honda. I even went with a tall seat on a Honda, like a desert seat, because I'm so tall and big. I just felt cramped on that with the stock seat, how low they were and all that. I don't know. It felt more like a 3-wheeler to me than a quad. The Suzuki, I had my Suzuki set up like, I ran a tall seat on my Suzuki though, too, on my 250. And I loved it because it made it feel like a dirt bike.
Really?
Yeah. I ran one of those high flight seats, the seat foam.
Right.
Yeah. But I really liked it because I could grip it, my knees like a dirt bike.
How tall are you?
Now?
Well, back
now?
when you were racing.
Yeah, I think I shrunk about 2 inches probably. I was 6'3".
Yeah, so you're no little guy.
No, I was 6'3", 200 pounds when I was racing.
Wow.
That's what gave me the nickname the Animal.
Really? Because you just could manhandle it?
Yeah, and when it was rough, that's when I shined on rough tracks like Carlsbad and stuff like that. When the rougher it got, the faster I'd go.
Wow, that's
kind of like Donnie Banks. Donnie's the same way, tall and lanky, and he could hang it out. He's got a totally different riding style than me, though. He hangs his ass over the rear grab bar. I ride it more neutral.
Yeah, but that's the height, the leverage, the strength. Wienen's 6'5".
Yeah, but your size hurt me though in Mickey's because like Denton, he's 135 pounds. I come into the turn on Denton and on him, and when we take off out of the corner, he'd be 5 bike lengths ahead of me. It was like cat and mouse at Mickey's. I never had any luck at the Mickey's tracks. That wasn't my type of track.
That was a lot of fun though. I mean,
they were fun. Yeah, but I never had any good success at Mickey's. That's more motocross and speedway was my forte.
I like the Mickey's because you could show up, race, take the machine home, and if they didn't throw it on its lid, you washed it and it was ready to go.
Yeah. What I didn't like too was the time qualifying. I just couldn't. I never put down fast laps. Like you got to go out there and do 2 fast laps, right? That just wasn't me. When the gate dropped, that's when I went fast. It was like in practice, it's more like a practice to me. It's like I don't know. I had a different switch in me. When the gate would drop, that's when I was on. But to go out and just say, okay, I got to hit 2 of my fastest laps, it didn't gel with me very well. It didn't do well at that, I don't think.
Some people struggle with that part,
Yeah. When the race is on, it's like a different mindset than going out there and, trying to go fast fight. You're the only one on the track, It's a little bit different.
Right. When you were racing at that point in time in ATVs, a lot of the racers were the developers also.
Definitely, yeah.
What were the things that you were working on to help your machines perform better?
Everything. You got to figure when we started racing the quads in '85, they were pretty stock. The first races they were stock, so it all evolved over time. But Greg Clark showed up at '85 at LA Coliseum with bars, which were Nerf bars, right? He had these bars that just kind of came back and ended. They didn't have loops like they normally do. They didn't loop around by the rear tire.
Right.
And he didn't have anything inside where the nets are, right? And I was like, wow, those look like they'd work good, because you don't lock tires like open wheel, like open wheel, you don't lock tires and run over each other.
Right.
But I looked at that, I'm like, well, if you lose your foot down there, you're going to be tangled up in that Nerf bar. You're going to break your damn leg, right?
Right.
So at that race, actually at Mickey's, everybody was protesting Clark, Mickey Thompson, and Mickey made him take the Nerf bars off because everybody's saying he's going to use them for a battery ram. I'm like looking at him, and everybody's saying it's unsafe to have those. I'm like, well, not really. If everybody had those, it'd be way safer because you wouldn't be, locking open wheel tires and doing flips down the straightaway.
Right.
So they made him take them off, and he couldn't race with them. And I went back after that. I was talking to Graydon, Steve Graydon, because Graydon helps. Graydon sponsored me since I was like 17 on dirt bikes. We had something going long before the quads. So with Graydon, I got back involved with him on the quads. And I went to Steve and I said, hey, I'm thinking we make Nerf bars different than what Clark had. But I'm thinking, I was thinking if we put metal, it's just all the mud's going to be on top. It's going to make it heavy. It's not, the mud's going to get stuck on top of the metal, right? To keep your feet from going in. I'm thinking aluminum, right? So I thought about NASCAR with the window nets. I said, what if we put nets on the Nerf bars? And he's like, yeah, that'd work. I said, I think it'd work great. I said, but, who can we make this? So he knew of a company that he bought product from. It's called GSM, Graham Sheet Metal. GSM was what most people knew him by. So they owned Ankra and they owned Interam handlebars. So they made tie downs. Excuse me, they had not Ankra, POSA, POSA tie downs and Interam handlebars. So they had the tube benders and everything there to build the handlebars to make the Nerf bar. And they had the tie down material to make the nets out of. So that's basically how the Nerf bar with net came about. We built a prototype for my quad, showed up at Ascot Motocross night racing, and I heard everything. Well, what do you think you're going to do? Fly with those wings on your quad, Fry? Everybody's making fun of them and everything, right? And, because they looked out of place because they're, not used to seeing those big bars on the side of the quad. So everybody was making fun of them. And that was '85. And then in '86, it was mandatory that you had to run Nerf bars with nets. All the rule book changed. Mickey Thompson, you had to have Nerf bars with nets. So that's how the Nerf bar with nets came about. Me and Steve Graydon came up with those and built them off my quad.
And that was the first guy, the first company. As I remember. Gosh, you know what? If I look hard enough, I think we still have a set of those Nerf bars.
Probably the Graydon ones.
Yep.
Yeah, probably. They evolved over time, but yeah, that's how it all started, though. But you couldn't ride a National or Mickey's without a Nerf bar with nets from '86 on.
Yeah, and the heel guard thing, I think, is something that they needed as well. And we would take the heel guards off for the longest time. Now we make aftermarket heel guard Nerf bar setups. So you take the stock stuff off and put better foot pegs on with better heel guards and Nerf bars.
I never wanted heel guards back then. I trimmed my rear fender, the bottom part. I cut it up higher so I could put my foot down behind the foot peg in case if I got locked onto another person's quad, I didn't have to get off the quad and pull it off. Like if you got locked on their rear wheel, ran your front bumper up on top of them, you know, you get wedged on a quad.
Yep.
I cut it out where I could put my feet in between the backside of the foot pegs and the fender, and I could put my feet and stand on the ground, and I could grab the handlebars and pull the quad off without getting off the quad. So I never really thought about, you know, putting gill guards on for that reason alone.
So I take it you've ran into the back or been wedged a few times?
Oh no, I never hit nobody. Ask all the old guys. They'll tell you.
I'm not believing that.
Yeah.
Were there anything else that you guys developed? Because Graydon just didn't make Nerf bars. He got involved in some other stuff too.
Yeah, the V-bars, the handlebars, the V-bars, that was my idea. I decided I wanted something different than that was available. I liked a different bend and a different height and stuff, and there wasn't available, so we ended up making the V-bars. Originally, we made them out of carbon steel, and it was at Gorman racetrack one time, and I was going up the hill where you go up and you hang a U-turn and you come off the drop-off. Well, going up the hill, it's real rough, so you're hanging back, clicking gears, going up this real rough uphill. And next thing I knew, the handlebar snapped off at where the V-bars go up and they meet the bar. Oh, right there, they snap my right throttle hand. And I'm hanging off the back of it, you know, wheeling up all the bumps, the rough stuff. And the handlebar snapped. So I fell off the back of the quad, pulling the throttle wide open more because I stretched the throttle cable, and the quad shot off the track, and I mowed over like about, I don't know, 5 to 10 people that were standing on the side of the track. Spectating. Yeah, so then we ended up making the handlebars out of chromoly. I was the crash test dummy on that one.
And didn't you guys come up with a kill switch too?
No, I don't know who came up with that. I know Graydon sold them, and I got them all from him, but they were those plug-in, the red plug-in ones that shorted out all the time. And then Tommy Burba at Pro Designs came up with his setup, and there was no need to reinvent the wheel after that one. That one was bulletproof.
Right. And then, you know, Yamaha's copied it, and a couple other people have too.
Yeah, you probably had a patent at one point, but it probably ran out.
Yeah, I don't know. He sold a shit. I mean, for a while there, that was the only kill switch you could buy.
Can we break for 1 second?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just got to go to the restroom. I'll be right back.
Okay.
You know, I was getting old. Your bladder doesn't hold it well.
And we're back.
All right.
When you dealt with Graydon, DG was also doing a lot of stuff. And
actually, DG helped me back then too. I got all my canned carburetors from them.
Right, they were the guys to buy them from.
Right. Yeah.
And then later on, another company came in, but we bought carburetors from them. There was a lot of stuff that you would get from Graydon and DG because those were the companies, you know, that had the ATV stuff for such a long time.
And then not White Brothers, DG, they hooked me up with CalFab. So I got my CalFab aluminum swing arms through them, and then we built some chromoly bottom A-arms for the Suzuki back in the early days in '85.
Wow.
I was bending and breaking the stock A-arms.
On that bike, I could see that.
On the Suzuki, yeah. So CalFab built the first chromoly A-arms off my quad back in the day.
Standard width, or did they try to go wider?
No, this standard width. Just needed something that wouldn't break. I was breaking everything. I broke the frames in half, and I mean, I just 2 weeks on a brand new quad, I destroy the frame. The center backbone, the center backbone, what is it? About, I don't know, 2.5, 3 inches.
Right.
Break those things in half. So I got to the point by 86, I knew just to get a new quad, strip it to the frame and put gussets and brackets everywhere on it, everywhere that I'd break them. I mean, I'd break it everywhere. The whole frame just started falling apart on early days.
Wow. And that was just the 85, 86 that you had that issue with?
The 500 too. Yeah. I actually broke a cylinder in half on the 500 from flexing the handlebars. It was making the frame go back and forth. And the head stay broke cracked the cylinder right at the intake, broke the cylinder in half.
Wow.
That was on the LT 500s.
Man, that's incredible. I mean, I've seen a lot of 500 cylinders break. Some of it you just think is fatigue, because the material that Suzuki used probably wasn't the best.
Yeah, it was actually the head stays come down. They got 2 bolts from the frame and 1 bolt on the top, the triangle. Yep. We made like a linkage that went down and then came forward, so it had flex to it, because I would flex the frame so bad in rough stuff from being mounted on the pegs and death grip on the bars. It would basically bend the frame back and forth to where it could be going back and forth like this, and then break the cylinder in half. I kept breaking cylinders, and we didn't know what the reason was at first. We figured it out. Barner helped me figure that out.
Yeah, that's a name from the past as well.
Yeah, he built some fast motors on the Suzukis. My 86 Suzuki was a rocket ship.
He was wild from what I heard.
Yeah, Barner was wild, man.
Didn't he get the Suzuki gig to do the motors?
I know they had they were working with a bunch of guys. I remember Paul Turner and him, and maybe even Billy Keefe from Clem.
Yeah,
Bill bought Clem, right, from Harry. But yeah, I remember because I wasn't on the factory team, but I remember that they were testing all these different engine builders' engines and then decided who they were going to use. And I don't think all the riders use the same engines. I think they use different engine builders on factory Suzuki, if I remember right.
I just remember the story that I was told about. One of the Suzuki guys came in complaining that his bike didn't have enough top end to Varner, and they stood it up on its grab bar and they ripped the pipe off of it, and he got a rat tail file out and filed the exhaust port.
That sounds like Varner.
And then put it back together and said, "Right,
that's some wild crap, man. He used to blow my mind on the stuff he'd do."
Yeah, I mean, that's metal shavings, didn't care, just run it.
Yeah, funny story was Terry did my motor and Denton's motor, right, in 86. And I used to leave my bike at Varner's shop, and so did Denton when he'd do B&O and stuff to him. I guess one day when I wasn't there, he let Denton ride my bike down the street. He's like, "Let me ride Brian's bike." They didn't tell me back then. I found out years later that this is what happened. He rode my bike and my 250 Suzuki. And then when I came over and Denton wasn't there, his bike was there. And Varner goes, "Hey, go try Gary's bike." And he didn't tell me that Gary rode my bike at that point, right? I went and rode his bike, and I was like, this thing is slow, man. It was like, it was just a torque motor, right? He put Suzuki RM250 ignition on mine, a button mag.
Right.
And on Denton's, he had this big, huge brass flywheel weight that he put on Gary's motor because he wanted this real low torque, and I wanted something that just exploded when you hit it, right?
Right.
And I guess Gary's comment to Terry was, "How does Fry ride this thing, man? This thing's it's too pipey, too explosive. And I was like, how does Denton win on this thing? This thing is slow. It was like, you got two different, riders on the same engine builder, and our motors couldn't have been more opposite. And he couldn't ride my motor, and I couldn't win on his motor. So it was like, it's kind of funny how one motor works for one rider, but not for the other rider.
Yeah, it's all about what you desire for your skill set and the feel that you want as it comes out of the turn, or how you're going down the straightaway.
Well, it was more Denton's 135 and I'm 200.
Right.
So, yeah. So I need something that's going to light the tires up as soon as you hit it. And he needs something that's not going to light the tires up and just be a torque monster. But
Did you know Gary when he raced motorcycles?
Actually, when I was raced was the Irwindale days when I was a kid, when I got hurt when I was 14. I used to watch him and David Taylor and all the pros there, Mike Bell, all the guys. I mean, Denton was like my hero when I was a kid. I used to watch him race in the pro class. It was just like, wow, man, these guys are badass, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So later on in life, I ended up being his main competition in quads. And it was kind of, he went from being my hero to somebody I don't like and want to beat.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny because me and Denton are good friends now, but we hated each other back then because we both wanted to win so bad.
Right.
It was like, I wouldn't say hate, but we didn't like each other when it came to racing, But we talked about that later on in life too. Both of us. I was like, he told me, I used to hate you. I said, I used to hate you too.
But I mean, competitors,
Well, we're friends now, dude. I bought my Warrior trailer from him back in 2000. Yeah, he saved me about $6,000 when I bought my trailer. But yeah, I mean, we're friends now. I went to this Hall of Fame party out in Glen Helen when he had that just recently.
Right.
He invited me to the Hall of Famer. We're buddies now. Back then, though, we wanted to kill each other on the track.
Well, that's because you were competitors, I mean,
he didn't like losing, and neither did I. So, and usually it was, in the early days, it was me or him were usually the ones that were winning a lot of races. I should say there was other people that won, but it was definitely we had our battles. I got my nickname from something he said. Animal,
right?
We're at Ascot Night Motocross, and they had this whoop section, and I came around the corner and he was in front of me, and I just thought I could probably just pull the front end up and wheel tap through all those whoops. So Denton was finessing through them and double through the whoops, little whoops that they had there at Ascot. And I went through and grabbed another gear, pulled the front end up high, and just wheel tapped the rear all the way through the whoops. Went by him like he was sitting still, and he came over to me in the pits, and he's like, "Dude, you went through those whoops like an animal." And then the next week, I showed up at the Ascot with "animal" on the ass of my leathers, and I told here, I'm like. He's like, I did it to kind of rub it in his nose, That's how it kind of stuck.
That's too cool.
Yeah. So Gary gave me the nickname Animal. I just went with it when he said it.
Did you get to go back to any of the nationals?
Yeah, in '86, Gary and I were the U.S. Suzuki riders. It wasn't the factory team like they had in '87. In '87, it was more of like a factory mechanic, box fan, fly to the races, all paid, salary from Suzuki. In '86, 85 of the fall, Suzuki picked me and Denton to ride for U.S. Suzuki through their marketing department. So all of our expense budget came from marketing, not from the race department.
Right.
And they called a meeting for me and Gary, and we met in some fancy restaurant in Brea. And there was it was 3 Japanese guys, I remember, and Mel Harris, who I just seen passed away not too long ago, I guess. Mel Harris from Suzuki. Remember, I think Joe Colombero might have even been there in that meeting. But anyway, like I said, I started racing quads from a bet, and then in October of '85, I'm sitting in a meeting to get a factory Suzuki support, right? And me and Denton are sitting there, and they offered us, I think it was 1 quad and $2,500 worth of parts for the year at their cost. So, that's probably like double the cost or even higher, because that's what they pay for it, right? Not what the dealer sells it for or the retail pays for it.
Right.
It was $2,500, 1 quad, and I think it was $5,000 in traveling expenses is what they came up with that they're offering us. And I was like bitching. I was like, wow, I was just sitting there in amazement that I was even sitting in that meeting, that all this stuff just happened so quickly, from a start of quad racing to where I was at that point. And I would have signed on the dotted line right then, but I just kind of sat back and listened, because I knew Gary had experience dealing with factories with his motorcycle racing, the contract stuff. And Gary's like, no, that's not enough. And I'm like looking at him like, what do you mean? I'm like, okay, well, I'm just keep my mouth shut. And Gary's gone, I need at least 2 quads. I need $5,000 in parts. I need $10,000 in traveling expenses. So he basically doubled what they were offering him. And I was just like, didn't say a word, because I'm like, well, he's whatever he's going to get, I'm going to get, I think. Right. So we both walked out of there with the deal that Denton cut. I walked out. I was like, "Hey, Gary, thanks a lot," because I was ready to sign the first cut at the beginning. So that was the money that they wanted us to do the nationals in '86 on. That didn't include anything for Mickey's or anything else. It was just that contract was to race the nationals in '86. So that's how I ended up going and doing the nationals. So we had to have our own van, our own mechanics, and they didn't give us the $10,000 like one lump sum. They just cut us like a couple grand for each time we'd go out of take off traveling for the race. So we didn't spend all the money, I guess, and then run out of money at the end of the season. So they kind of monitored our money and didn't give it to us all at one shot.
Well, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I ended up with, walked out of there with probably $25,000 more than I had in my pocket when I walked in, counting all the bikes and parts and the traveling money.
So $10,000 back then to travel. How many events did you go to?
All of them. And then I took Barry Kalpris with me, and his parents paid half of the traveling expenses. We split it in half. So I ended up making some money off of the traveling expense money. I didn't spend all the money to get there. So actually hooked up with Greg Clark too. We put him in the van and did a couple of them too. So we split it 3 ways. So I always tried to, it was my van and my trailer. So I try to get other riders to come with us and hook up and split the cost. I ended up using some of that 10 grand I put in my bank account to live on.
Well, that's a good deal, right?
Yeah.
And you and Gary didn't travel together, even though you were basically teammates?
No, that's when we started hating each other, because we're both trying to win nationals. 85, it wasn't so bad, but 86, it was on.
Did they pay?
And I came out and won the first A1 race at Anaheim in '86. So that didn't sit well with Gary either, because he ended up second. In fact, he was winning, and I passed him in the last. I won the first moto, and he got second, and second motor, he was in front of me, and I ended up passing him and beating him. So then that's probably when he probably started hating me a lot.
Did they pay good contingency?
Oh, yeah, because you had to ride the Golden States to qualify, and I think they were paying like I think it was like $350 first at a CMC Golden State for a Suzuki contingency, and they paid like down to fifth. I think it was down to fifth or so. So it'd be like 350, 250, 150, 150 or something like that. And then you made the Perts money also from CMC. So go out and make $500 winning a CMC race on a quad back in the 80s. So basically I'd try to hit as many races as I could. Every race that paid, I'd hit every race I could,
Yeah, because that paid well.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was able to make enough money racing that I ended up quitting my job in '85. Yeah. And actually, too, like with '85, I started got my quad in like April, I think. And the first race was, first big race was the LA Coliseum, Suzuki Quad Cross during the Supercross.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it, but my bike was cutting out all day and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I washed it the night before because I went out and did some testing at a little field that I had by my house. And after I washed the bike and went to ran it up down the street, everything ran bitching at the Coliseum, and every jump I hit and every bump, the thing would start sputtering and cutting out. Couldn't figure out what was wrong with the motor, right? And it would run bitching, then it'd just start sputtering off the jumps and every bump I'd hit. So I was in the pits and asking everybody. I'd run it up and down the pits on the asphalt, and it wouldn't sputter one bit, right? I'm like, what the heck? I'm pulling all the tank and everything off, looking for wires shortened and stuff, and changed out the dead man switch. Just couldn't figure it out. And so anyway, I ended up going and racing without fixing the problem. And the bike was just cutting out and sputtering, then it'd run great. And Clark was in first and I was in second, and I'd catch up to him, and then it stuttered. He'd gap me. And it was just cat and mouse the whole time. I was just like, every time I think I'm going to pass him, the thing would start cutting out. And then I ended up getting second, and John Neary and his dad were parked next to us. And I even was talking to his dad, seeing if he could help me figure it out, because Pops was pretty smart about everything, right? He knew how to work on stuff. And after the race was over, I come in and he walks over with a T-handle Phillips and pops the ignition cover off the side of my quad. He didn't say anything. He just walked over and took my ignition cover off. And I'm like, looking at him, and just water just poured out of my ignition from when I washed my bike the night before. Somehow it got in through the gasket. And he's like, I'm like, why didn't you tell me that earlier today? And he goes, because I didn't want you to beat my kid. I was like, all right, I got your number. I know what you're about now, Pops. But yeah, I was good friends with Neary and his dad. They were good people.
Oh man.
I was like, you SOB.
That's too classic right there.
I guarantee I would have won that race. I was going faster than everybody in practice, but the bike was just cutting. But
oh God.
That was like 6 weeks after I bought the quad. And I'd say within a month and a half, 2 months later, everybody all the companies wanted to sponsor quad racers back then. It was like the whole sport was just going on fire, right?
Right.
And I had like 20 something sponsors of free stuff on my quad after like just 3 months of racing quads. And then, like I said, the next thing I know, in October, I'm signing a contract with Suzuki, and I'm just like going, where did all this shit come from? It was just like, it just happened.
That's so cool. Yeah. That is so, so cool.
But as I kind of took a different attitude because of what happened with my motorcycle racing, because I dedicated myself. I was at the gym in the morning. I'd burn 5 gallons out of my 480 practicing every day, and I'd be at the gym at night. And then I'd race up to 5 times a week sometimes, because we used to have all the night racing back then, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday, Saddleback Saturday, and wherever on Sunday. So, I mean, I was riding all the time and at the gym all the time. And I put a lot of work into it, thinking I was going to go race Supercross in the Nationals, and everything just, it just disappointed me big time. I was depressed over what happened. And when the quad thing came up so damn easy, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go have fun this time. I'm going to have fun. And when the fun's over, I'm done. And that's kind of why in '88, the fun was over for after making money all those years and then not making it, it was like, I'm over it.
Right.
Yeah. So I had a lot of fun. I wasn't so serious as some of the other guys. I think that's why Gary got so pissed off all the time, because he knew I wasn't putting in the effort that he was. He told me that when he invited me to come to the Hall of Fame, he told me, he goes, I never told you this before, Brian. He goes, but you made me bust my ass, and you helped me be a better rider to win those championships. He said, because I wanted to beat you so bad that I had to work my ass off training to be able to beat you on rough tracks. I was like, that's pretty cool, Gary. Thanks for saying that. That was just like a year ago, that he said that. So
for something like that to come out of that guy's mouth, that's a huge accolade. Right?
Yeah. He never told me that before. So I was like, well, that's really cool, Gary. I'm glad you told me that before I die.
Yeah.
Getting up there in age, I'll be 60 next week. So
you're still young, brother.
Yeah. No, my body's not young. It's beat up.
Well, I mean, that happens, right?
Yeah. I just have a lot of problems with my knees and stuff, and my club foot and stuff. I get a lot of issues.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But as long as you can keep the rest of you healthy, you should be okay, right?
Oh yeah. I'm just saying, I'm in no position to get on a motorcycle or anything. I hung up that 92 the last time I was laying on the emergency slab.
No more dirt bikes, huh?
I was racing dirt bikes in 92 again, and I got hurt out in the field. We were out cutting a new track in, and I made a big mistake and hit a boulder the size of a Volkswagen when I was airborne. I kind of cross-rutted off the face of a jump we were building into the track in the field, and it shot me right into these big boulders that were like basically the size of a Beetle Volkswagen.
Ouch.
I flew like 20, 30 feet from the takeoff of the jump and landed front wheel first into this huge boulder. And it bent my knee completely backwards, ripped everything out, and broke my wrist from just the impact of the handlebars snapping into my arm. I had a big dinner fork. But my knees, they fixed it. I didn't have insurance back then, and they took a year before I got surgery, so I had to wear a knee brace for a year. And I was getting married. That happened in February, and I got married in May of '92. I was walking with a tux with a knee brace underneath to be able to get down the aisle, and I had my surgery like in December of that year, '92. But
how did your wife take the racing and the injuries?
She was fine with it. She rode. She was riding before I knew her, so that's what attracted me to her. She had a stolen milk crate with a helmet and boots in it, so I was like, "You're up my speed."
Nice.
This is a stolen milk crate, If you're not a real motorcycle racer unless you got a stolen milk crate in your garage, right?
Well, didn't we all worry that they were going to come and collect them and fine us, because it said what was it a $500 fine if you got caught with them?
Yeah, probably.
And everybody had one.
Everybody. Yeah, that was your stand for your motorcycle.
Right.
Yeah, you had to get the one with the metal ring in it though. The plastic ones would cave.
Correct.
Yeah, you had to get the right one. Yeah, she rode and stuff too. She had her own quad. After we got together, I got her on quads and stuff, so she did a lot of riding on quads.
Did your family grow up going to the sand dunes?
But my parents divorced when I was 4 or 5, and then my stepdad was the one that got us into the motorcycles. He got when I was like 2nd grade, he got the first years of the like 70 or 71 ATC 90 big balloon tires. So I learned how to ride on that when I was younger. And then like I said, at 9, I got the 125 Suzuki. They bought me and my brother the Suzuki 125 TS 125, and they had the lights on them. Their plan was, well, we lived right down the street from Saddleback back then on Chapman, right by the Orange Freeway. And so we bought the street legal ones because that's all they had back then. And my parents' idea was we could ride around on the street with them driving us on the back, and then we could ride them in the dirt. Well, that lasted about maybe 2 or 3 weeks because we broke all the taillights and blinkers and everything off, crashing them, learning how to ride, right? So they got stripped of dirt bikes right away. And then the following year, my stepdad bought my mom a TS 185, and then he bought him a Yamaha MX 360, 1973. And then we started riding. We started riding Gorman in different places, camping overnight in the back of a pickup truck with a camper shell. Just out playing wreck riding, and got all the kids in the neighborhood to start riding. And my stepdad took a 4-rail trailer and stretched 2 racks on the back, 2 more on the front. So he turned it into a 8-rail trailer and got all the neighbors in the neighborhood to buy their kids motorcycles, and we'd take a truck full of kids in the back of a camper shell and go riding every weekend. And then they got into the dunes, and he bought a turbocharged Honda Daiko sand rail. I don't know if you remember them back then. They were real shorties.
Okay.
I mean, it was, sick rail back then with a Honda Civic front wheel drive motor in the rear and with a turbo.
Yep.
So he got that, and then we started going to Glamis a lot. And that's when I got the TT 500 and put the paddle tire on and converted it into the racing bike. So yeah, we always did the dunes. I did the dunes for up till probably last dune trip I made was probably 2000 or 2001. I quit going after that when we had kids and just getting too crazy out there.
So your kids didn't go to the dunes with you?
Just when they were really young. Yeah, they were really young. I bought a sand rail after that accident in 92 on the dirt bike. When I did my knee and my wrist in 93, I bought a sand rail, and we had our first kid in 96, Kyle, and then in 98 we had our other son, Blake. So we took them out there once when they were like 3 and 5, and strapped them both in the passenger seat of my sand rail. They both fit in one bucket.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and then Kyle, he was on a quad already then, so he was riding a little quad 50 around too. But yeah, it was, how Glamis is. It just got really crazy and wild, and seen some friends get jacked up really bad. I had another friend, it was after we quit going, his 15-year-old son got killed out there on a dirt bike, got hit by our sand rail. It just, after doing it from the early days and then watching Glamis evolve into the chaos and wildness and, people going too fast every different direction and killing people, I just said, man, I don't want to take my kids out here and have anything happen. So we hung it up, and I took my older boy, he wanted to race since he was 3 years old, so we couldn't race till he was 4, so we started racing when he was 4.
The younger one didn't take it up.
He didn't want anything to do with a dirt bike because he's seen his brother get hurt. You know, he had some injuries when he was young on 65s and stuff, and he just had no interest of it. And then I got him a quad when he was 9, an Apex 90.
Right.
Got him one of those when he was 9, and then he started racing quads, and he was kicking ass and winning a lot all the time on the quad. And he blew it up on a Thanksgiving weekend at El Mirage. We went out camping with a bunch of people, and he blew it up on the dry lake bed because he didn't know he had to let off and let the cylinder get some oil in there, right? So he just rode it wide open until it blew up the first ride he took off on it. And I wasn't riding with him. He was on the dry lake bed. So he blew it up, and we were there for 3 days. And my buddy had his ex-wife's TTR 125 there. And he's like, well, Blake wants to ride it. You can ride that, you know, because he didn't have anything to ride after he blew up the bike. And I didn't have any parts to fix it. So got him he didn't want to ride it. And I go, come on, you can ride it right here and it's all flat on the dry lake bed. And then he got on that thing and he loved it. And then I was like, well, I go, you want one? You want a motorcycle? He said, yeah. So I bought him a TTR 125. He rode that thing for a little bit. Then I got him a CRF 150 big wheel. I bought him a brand new big wheel. He's been riding ever since. But he never got much into the racing. He raced a couple races, but he never had any interest in going racing full time like Kyle did. Kyle was racing since he was 4 every weekend till 4, I think. He's 26 now, I believe.
That's pretty crazy. Brian, I want to ask if I can invite you back because I know we didn't cover everything.
Oh, yeah. I had a long career, so yeah, I know we didn't cover a lot.
We only hit the highlights, and I want to take a deep dive into some of the things.
The team here at ATV-TALK would love your feedback. Please email us at hello@atvtalkpodcast.com. If you're in need of a consultation for your current racing program, a custom ATV, or an industry guest speaker, I have the company for you. Duncan Technologies International, Inc. offers host, MC, and guest speaking services at events, builds custom ATVs for recreational riding or racing around the world, and they offer consulting services for professional teams or individual racers. Send inquiries to duncantechinternational@gmail.com or call 619-716-1532 for more information. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to share us with your family and friends. The podcast is available on all streaming platforms, and you can find us on social media as ATV Talk Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter